Now, Leon Russianoff, we are going to say a few words to you before we have our opening performance, but I'm just very, very curious if in a few words you can describe, not even as it applies to clarinet, but generally, what makes a great teacher? What is the attribute as opposed to a great performer? What is a great teacher?
I'd have left less typically with that question if you didn't stipulate that I have to use a few words, because I'm a man of many words. But I have certain ideas. As a matter of fact, yesterday I had the great honor of having, as my companion at the Manhattan School of Music faculty meeting, Miss Lillian Fuchs, and we discussed how we both became great teachers. As far as I really am concerned, though, as far as I can really, really put my finger on how it comes to be a great teacher, I'm afraid that I have to go into the field of psychology and feel that the first thing you have to do is to sort of love people, and especially love your students, and feel that they have something special to offer the musical world, something special to offer you as a teacher, which you can sort of throw back at them sometime later. So I know that I'm not in the mainstream of so-called great teachers. Incidentally, I retitled your program, Bob.
Oh, yes?
It didn't sound modest to tell people to listen to a great teacher program, so I called it Great Teachers and Otherwise.
I see. All right.
But anyhow, I know I'm not in the mainstream of the tradition of great teachers, because if you read any of the biographies of the great artists, they will always evaluate their greatest teachers as the most punitive teachers, the ones who harassed them the most, the ones who scolded the most, and the one who berated and insulted them the most. Well, that's just the opposite of where I'm at. I've been affected a lot by the work of my great wife. She's a movie star. She's a great writer. And she has really influenced me in thinking of what they call a positive reinforcement. And that's what we do. We work on the skills. I found that there were only about 2 students in a very long career that I really didn't like. I really couldn't stand them, you know. One couldn't pay for his lessons, and that was one of the reasons. I did find that there were very few people that I couldn't like, because the one-to-one relationship that exists in a studio room is like a love affair, really, if you really work at it that way. And so we work on skills, and we work on techniques, but I also get many people who are really taught to abuse themselves if they make a mistake. You'll find students, when they make a mistake, the first thing they'll say is, "I'm sorry." And I say, "What are you sorry for? If you didn't make a mistake, I wouldn't have any value here." The next thing you'll find, some people hit themselves. Their parents aren't around to hit them, so they sort of take a little pat at their own cheek and then they say, "Stupid." And I try to work against all those concepts and try to really find out from them what they can do. The other thing is that I do not, since I'm not a great player, Stanley says I'm the best 8-bar player that he knows, but beyond that I get a little mixed up. I'm really not distressed if anybody doesn't become a great player. As a matter of fact, I guess that almost every major symphony orchestra is one of my students, but I would also say every veterinarian hospital has another student who's taught clarinet by Russianoff. We have a lot of insurance agents, a lot of doctors, but all of them have carried the work that we've done in the studio, the music that they have been able to play, and the mastery of the instruments they've achieved. They've carried it to a professional level, even though they're doctoring or veterinarian.
I noticed a bit. Leon Russianoff, our great or otherwise teacher of the day, and several things I wanted to ask you. Leon, so many teachers are themselves major performers. You said that you are not a great player. If you are not a great player, now I can see it better in a case of a voice teacher who may not have the physical, vocal beauty, but the technique and knowledge and the rest of it is there. How is it that you are not, or describe yourself, I don't believe you, but how is it that you describe yourself as not a great player if you can? Why cannot you, in other words, adapt all of what you're teaching and tell yourself that you're going to give something to the world and be a great player?
Well, when I say I'm not a great player, it doesn't mean I'm totally incompetent. I'm a very, very good player. To be a really great player requires other things beyond the skills of playing, the techniques of playing, and even the feeling for music. To be a great first clarinet player requires stamina, requires a tremendous amount of confidence, which I'm better able to give than achieve. It requires even more than that. It requires the ability to suffer and sustain some rather unpleasant abuse, and to go through all these things with good cheer. And then above all, it takes a feeling that you have inside that genetically somehow or other you have a certain something that is very unusual. Now, the reason I didn't pursue my career, I did play a lot. I played with the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo for several years. I have the record of 11 flop shows in a row on Broadway. Absolutely, when I went into a show, they closed in 3 days. 11 shows in 6 months is a lot. I was in a successful show, Song Norway, which is playing now. I played a lot, but that feeling of getting up on a stage and being totally transported and unaware of audience never came to me easily. So, you know, I grew up during the Depression and got married very early and had to earn a living, and I found that I could teach. And as a matter of fact, if I may divert just for one moment, I'd like to dedicate the program to one of my earliest students, who was a young man of 11 years old by the name of Stanley Drucker, who consumed more orange pop in my house than any other. Incidentally, I forgot to mention the orange pop syndrome of teaching. That if a student has to have orange pop, you give some orange pop while he's studying, and if you can't practice scales every day, you could find something that his imaginative personality could handle. And with Stanley, I would give him a new method book each week, and he would read it through.
It's funny, you use orange pop, my mother has cookies all over for her students,
right,
so it amounts to the same thing,
yeah,
I guess.
Yeah. Today we have to give them diet cola, you know, but that is very important. I really would like to take just 1 minute to dedicate the program to Stanley Drucker. Well, he and I share a lot of things. He was the best man at my wedding, and I was the best man at his wedding. I don't know, you know, subsequently he's the best man at his own wedding, his own family, and I'm the best man at mine, I think. But Stanley and Naomi played a beautiful duet at my wedding. He, I think, is certainly the greatest clarinet player of our generation, and I think of all times, perhaps. The standards of playing are so high today that just to be connected with Stanley, I mean, I may have contributed something to his career, but I never tell him this personally, but I never tell him this personally, but publicly, I'd like to tell him that he has enhanced my career. All I have to do is say, I teach Stanley Drucker. It's almost as good as saying, I teach at Juilliard, you know? But, so he has contributed a lot to mine, and his love, their child is named after me, which is one of the great flatteries of my life. I'm madly in love with his wife, and only the precepts against adultery sort of hold back a little bit. But I really love Naomi, and I love Stanley, and they've been a very big part of my life, and I'd like to dedicate this program to them.
Well, that's very, very beautiful. Leon, whom did you study with?
My major teacher and my major inspiration was a man by the name of Simeon Bellison, who I think you know.
I did. Matter of fact, I took lessons from Simeon the last years of his life, and last week marked the 100th anniversary of his birth.
Really? Is that so?
Yes.
I know that you have a connection with him because he had a great pianist. His name was Nadia Reisenberg.
Yes.
You know?
Oh, yes. Yes, we have bumped on occasion. She's the one with the cookies.
Oh, I see. Anyhow, Bellison was my major teacher. He played a different instrument than we do. He played a German-style clarinet, and he knew one fingering for a note, whereas we now know 13. He was really a man who really was inspirational.
But he also epitomizes what you said before, the gentle, encouraging approach, rather than I can't imagine Bellison raising his voice.
Well, but you know, Bellison, it was really the opposite of me. Bellison's big attribute was dignity. I don't have too much.
Yes, I've noticed that.
Yeah. But Bellison was inspired. I have a story to tell. I was so nervous that I left my house in Brooklyn to go to his house, which is in the South Bronx, which is now rather, a desolate area. He lived at Walton Avenue near Yankee Stadium. It was a long trip from Brooklyn. And I would get ready to go, and my mother would check my fingernails because she felt if you had clean fingernails, a shine, and a blue tie and a white shirt, you couldn't miss in this world. And so after passing inspection, I got on the train, but I was so nervous that I had to blute all the way. And I got up to Yankee Stadium Station and was so nervous, bluted again. And when we got there, we were so nervous and we were so upset. Now, my students don't have that feeling, and it was Mr. Bellison. Mr. Bellison wore a nice satin robe, and he sat, and Mrs. Bellison would bring him a cup of tea, and my students banged on the door, "Hey, Leon, here I am," It was a different approach, and I think he was tremendously inspirational. He was the epitome of music. He was into music, and he was not into the technique of playing that much.
I see.
But he was a great, great, great man. I'll never forget him.
Well, now we can add a second dedication then on this program, right?
Right, absolutely.
So our program is being dedicated, in part at least, to Stanley Drucker. Naomi, let's welcome you first. What is your son's name?
My son's name is Leon.
Gee, isn't that a coincidence?
It certainly is.
And you have also worked with Leon Russianoff?
Yes, Leon was a major influence and a major teacher in my career. I happily combine a career of playing and teaching. And as a teacher, I recognize Leon Russianoff's ability. He has the unique ability to problem solve for each student. Mm-hmm. Each player comes to him with strengths and weaknesses, and he can put his finger on just what the problem is and has the methods and the techniques to solve those problems and free a student from mechanical difficulties so that he or she can go on to play the music.
Speaking of methods, he was telling us before about his touching system. How did that work out?
I don't know anything about that.
You don't? I see. Charles Neidich, what has been your experience working with Leon?
Well, it's been terrific. I came to him when I was about, 16 years old, a long time ago. And before that, it's interesting, I'd also studied with my father, Irving Neidich. His approach was rather similar to Leon's, that they had both actually studied with Bellison, and came up. But when I came of age, my father told me, he says, "Well, now you have to get a real teacher. There's only one to go to, Leon Russianoff." And what was most remarkable about his teaching was the way he was able to tailor a program to fit, in my case, my needs, and to fit each student's needs. Many teachers, they have a set course of study. You do this, then you do this, then you do this, and by the end of that you can play fantastically. Now, everyone knows that that's not the case, actually. And what Leon was able to do, he was able to immediately sense what a student needs, and to tailor-make a program of study to fit that student. Consequently, each of his students sounds differently, although each of them has, you could say, the basics of playing.
Comment on something about Charlie that would be very important to this conclave here. Charlie represents the kind of education, I think, that really works. Charlie neglected to mention that he was an outstanding major in anthropology at Yale. He was not in the music department. He won, I think, most of the competitions, the concerto competition. He played the Nielsen concerto at his graduation. He gave me about the severest case of inferiority complex that I ever had, because in one pocket Charlie would carry Buber, the thou and I, or something like that. In the other pocket he would carry the unpronounceable Kierkegaard, you know, and I was reading Gone with the Wind. But anyhow, Charlie, I learned from Charlie, and I remember one thing that I would like to share with you, is that when there was a problem with the draft, Charlie applied for a certain conscientious objector status, and I said, would you write me a letter? I said, absolutely, because I'll recommend anybody for anything. But he said, I don't want you to write the letter unless you really know how I feel. And he wrote me this magnificent précis of his own morality as far as war and killing and going to the army. It was said, needless to say, he did not get the conscientious objector status because it was such a valid premise that he went on. But Charlie represents, to me, what we can do as musicians. You know, if ever we get in trouble, he can dig up some stuff on 42nd Street, you know.
With great thanks and love to you, we close out our session. Thanks
Bob,
again.
I have just a fast third dedication, and that's to you, who's done more for young people in music than anybody I have ever known.
Thank you indeed. Tomorrow, Rose Bampton winds up our week of great teachers in the listening room. Join us.
These are the radio stations of the New York Times, WQXR-FM 96.3, WQXR 1560 New York at the tone 12 noon.